Welcome to Toastmasters Beta Bay, where we feature speakers from San Francisco to Monterey. My name is Birgit Starmanns, and I'll be your host for this episode. Toastmasters is an organization that helps its members grow in their communication and their leadership skills by providing regular meeting times so that speakers can hone their craft. Toastmasters also helps advanced speakers develop their style. You can think of it really similar to performing arts. Certain musicians and singers tend towards jazz and blues, while others tend towards pop. Some actors and actresses tend towards drama, others to comedy. Some dancers to ballroom, others to tap and jazz. Similarly, different styles of speaking are appropriate for different situations, and Toastmasters helps speakers develop those skills. For example, during a business conference, you'll use one style of speaking, whereas a motivational speaker will use very different techniques. Today, we're going to see a slice of a Toastmasters meeting. We're going to have two very advanced speakers, followed by an evaluation of those speakers. Our first speaker is Aaron McDaniel, and his speech is entitled, "The First Step to Being a Successful Young Professional." Please help me welcome Aaron.
I was 3 months into my first job out of college, and I was standing up against that defining moment that people dread, that sends chills down everyone's spine. My first performance review. But I wasn't scared. I was actually excited. I was expecting fireworks. I was doing great at my job. I had talked to my peers. I was figuring out exactly what I needed to do. The people who were working for me, they were behind my vision. And I wasn't bothering my boss at all. I wanted to let her know that I could handle it. So when I sat down, all of a sudden my demeanor totally changed. As my boss said, words that still sting today, "Aaron, I don't even know if you really understand your job. I just don't understand that you get it. You're not giving me any feedback, and so I think you're a little lost with things." I was totally stunned. But what I realized was that I forgot to do one of the most important things that you need to do, and that's learn how your boss communicates. Learn how to work with your boss. It oftentimes determines the success you have in your career. And it was at that moment that I realized that school does not teach you how to be successful in the corporate world. There's no book, there's no course, there's no manual that you have. It's really about learning things the hard way. Now, as millennials are entering the workforce, corporate leaders are realizing that these new young professionals are different. The Facebooking, texting, YouTubing kids don't communicate the same way others do. And so these corporate leaders are looking to change in order to adapt to this group. But the problem is that they're missing this one side of the equation. And that's actually teaching these young professionals, these millennials, what it's like to be in a corporate environment. Now, to add a little insult to injury, there are a couple characteristics that a lot of millennials have, myself included, that put us at a further disadvantage. One is this sense of impatience. Whereas more wise generations are used to having to wait for information back, and a letter that takes a couple weeks, or a phone call that's not returned for a few days because it was stuck on the answering machine. Millennials are used to hearing back in seconds, instant gratification, a text message, a tweet, a Facebook message, just like that. And that's not how the corporate world works. I was expecting to be promoted and offered a big raise after 3 months in my job. Not quite the truth. The other thing is, young professionals, millennials, are used to these cycles, these 4-year cycles. In high school, you're working hard for 3 years, then that last year you're focused on the next step, going to college. Then you get to college, focus 3 years on studying hard, then you're looking to the next step, getting a job. But then what happens after a few years in your job? It's not a 4-year cycle, it's a 40-year cycle. Very different. The second quality is this sense of entitlement. Millennials are often referred to as the trophy generation. I cannot tell you how many trophies and ribbons and certificates I have just for participating in a soccer team or even having attendance in class. And what we're not used to is the fact that that's just the baseline. That's your job to show up. And you're not going to be praised and patted on your back just for doing what you're paid to do. That's what your paycheck's for, right? But don't lose all hope, because there's one thing you can do to make sure that you're setting yourself up to have a successful career. And that's about taking ownership. Not waiting for someone to praise you and telling you that you're the best thing ever, but to realize that you need to be conscious of these couple characteristics that millennials have and find ways to rise above it. No matter what your job title is, doesn't mean you can't be a leader. You don't have to be the president. You don't have to have 100 direct reports. You can be a leader. A few years ago, I was at a conference for my company. It was a big thing that everyone does every year, and there's thousands of people, literally. And this year it was down in San Diego. And one of the things that happens every year is that they have a guest speaker. And usually it's a pretty big-name person. But they usually like to keep it secret, not let it out of who it is. And we were getting to the end of the conference. It was about time to unveil who this speaker was going to be. And I decided to slip out the back and quickly go to the bathroom. And as I did that, I remember looking down the hall and seeing a figure that I recognized. It was Chris Gardner. Now, for those who don't know the movie The Pursuit of Happiness that starred Will Smith, Chris Gardner was a gentleman who went literally from rags to riches. He was homeless and turned around and in a few years became a multi-millionaire. And it just so happened that my father, who is a limo driver, had driven Will Smith and Chris Gardner during the filming of the movie in San Francisco. And so he told me a little bit about what Chris was like, and I decided to share the story with Chris. And he was a great guy. He ended up inviting me backstage, and as he was getting mic'd up and ready to go up on the stage, he started asking me some questions. He said, "Aaron, what do you do at AT&T, the company I work for?" And at the time, I thought to myself, well, there's these executives and VPs and officers that are here at this conference. I'm just a sales manager. And Chris stopped me dead in my tracks. He said, "Just a sales manager? You're not just anything." And he was right. It's about me taking ownership and me being the leader I can be. Now, it ended up that Chris went on stage, killed it, standing ovation, and he was signing books afterwards, and I decided to get in line. Got up, it was my turn, and he looked at me and said, "Oh, who's this book for?" Smiling. I said, "That's for me." So he opened it up to the page he likes to sign on, and he goes, "Not just. That's what I'm going to call you from now on." I kind of laughed and walked off and looked at the book. And a couple months later, I got a call randomly one evening from my dad. He said, "Aaron, guess who I drove today?" And usually he has a pretty big A list of people, so I couldn't guess exactly who it was. And he said, "Oh, it's Chris Gardner." And I laughed, and he said, "Well, here's the thing." I started to tell him that story you told me about San Diego, and he said that Chris stopped him right in his tracks and said, "You're not just that, aren't you?" So remember, no matter what your job title is, no matter whether it's assistant, associate, whatever it may be, you're not just that associate. You're not just that assistant. You're not just that analyst. You're a leader who is building a strong foundation for a successful career in the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Aaron.
Sure.
Wonderful speech.
Thank you.
How long have you been a Toastmaster?
It's been going on 3 years now.
And which clubs are you a member of?
So I have started with Rhino Toastmasters, and they're always my home, the Crash, and I'm also part of Evening Stars.
Yay.
Yeah.
So am I. So tell me a little bit. You're also you're an author of a book.
That's correct. So I'm in the process right now. I just signed with the publisher to write a book. I call it Young Professional's Edge, or YP Edge. The first title is The 25 Attributes of a Successful Young Professional.
Great. Looking forward to reading it.
Thanks
Thank
so
you so
much.
much. Next, we're going to hear from Aaron's Evaluator. And Aaron's Evaluator is a member of multiple clubs, and tonight he's representing a new club, Mandarin English Toastmasters. Please help me welcome Chris Pon.
Thank you, Madam Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome guests. And Aaron, that was an excellent speech, but don't expect a promotion from me. I liked how he immediately got into a story. Not even an introduction, he just leapt right into it and said, "Hey, this is where I was." And he said it very nicely. All the critical elements of a story were there. The setting, who was involved, what was involved, and what was about to happen, and most of all, the conflict. The story worked for his main point of setting him where he was, and he setting him on a little confusing path but where he was going to go. I liked the mixed audience that he ingrained in his whole speech. This wasn't a speech just for young professionals like myself. It was a speech for both young professionals and those who supervise them. He really ingrained that pretty well. And I liked the visuals, too, of the trophies that he described that this generation comes from, whereas it's not 4 years or 3 years. The expectations from the other side is it's 40 years. Very good visuals. And of course, the lesson of learning to communicate with the boss is not something that you learn in school. Very, very good statement there. And he paused just enough to make sure that point was made across very well as other points. He did do a little bit pacing, though. So when he came out here, he was very comfortable. When he got onto his story, I noticed that he was going back and forth. And he would go into a story fine, but he would also stop for points, but then keep going back and forth, and I wasn't sure why. Just make sure you stay in one point, Aaron, and make sure you pause and anchor yourself somewhere when you are into your story so that you do make sure you stay for the camera, too. I also think that the ending could be just very slower. If you want to end not on thank you, just slow that last sentence down. You're not just an assistant. You are a leader making a successful career for your future. And you end it like that, something like, not exactly those words, but so that you can just really nail it down at the end. Stop. Okay? Other than that, though, I thought it was really good, and if he does it again, he just might get a promotion from me.
Thank you, Chris. Next, we're going to see a taped segment. We did an interview of the runner-up for the World Championship of Public Speaking, which is a Toastmasters International competition. And actually, Rory Vaden was that runner-up 2 times. Let's hear from him.
It's sort of deja vu for me to be back here because a couple years ago, this was like the very first district conference that I ever spoke at after going to the World Championship of Public Speaking. And life has been crazy in an awesome way ever since then. In 2007, out of 25,000 contestants from over 20 countries, I was the 2007 Toastmasters International World Champion of Public Speaking, first runner-up. The youngest person in the history of Toastmasters to make it to the World Championship twice. I went back-to-back, once when I was 23 in 2006 and once when I was 24 in 2007. I knew at a fairly young age that I wanted to be a professional speaker and an author. And it's like, who's going to listen to a 20-something-year-old about success and self-discipline? And so when I learned about the World Championship of Public Speaking, to me, I thought, wow, what a great avenue or vehicle that if I could win the World Championship of Public Speaking, that people would maybe take note of that. And now, since that time, I leveraged that experience and started a company called Southwestern Consulting. And most people know us because we're the ones who do the huge motivational sales training conferences. People go, wow, he's so young. And I am young in age time, but I'm very, very old in stage time. From October 27th, 2005, which was the day that I decided to pursue the World Championship, and August of 2007, when I came in second, I spoke 304 times for free. And through that process, not only did I become a better speaker, but I became a better student of speaking, because I recorded every single presentation and watched every single presentation and I was becoming my own best coach. And the good news about that is that everybody has a chance. There's a hope for everybody. But the bad news, or the realistic news, is that you have to work at it. You have a choice between every day taking the stairs and taking the escalator. And most people choose the escalator. We choose the convenient way, the easy way. We look for the shortcut. All successful people take the stairs. They do the things that they know they should do even when they don't feel like doing it. They do the things that other people aren't willing to do. And so that's where Take the Stairs came from. And so I said, I'm going to take the stairs more often. I'm going to make a commitment to take the stairs as a physical reminder that I am a person that's willing to do things that other people aren't willing to do. The thing that we have screwed up in our escalator society and that media tells us is that there's a shortcut, there's a magic pill, there's a secret formula, and that's just not the truth. The truth is that we have to do the things that we don't want to do. We have to pay a price. We have to work hard, we have to be disciplined, we have to take the stairs.
Welcome back. Now we have another advanced speaker for you. I'd like to bring up Anthony Hogan for his speech called Home. Please help me welcome Anthony.
I left my home in Georgia, headed for the Frisco Bay. 2,000 miles I roamed just to make this dock my home. Home. Such a short, simple word, but with a long, complex meaning. Now, for many people, home is merely the four walls in which you live, or maybe the city in which those four walls are in. But I'm here to challenge that definition of home. You see, for me, home does not just mean where I am, but how I am and who I am. You see, I have three places that I call home. And it just so happens that all three of those places are combined in the song by Otis Redding, which you heard me destroy at the beginning here, Sitting on Dock of the Bay. And the first time I heard that, I was in my first home. I left my home in Georgia. Georgia, my first home. Albany, Georgia, to be specific. You know, people say that your home is where your heart is. Well, you know where I learned to love? I learned to love in Albany, Georgia. Now, I wasn't born in Albany, Georgia, but my mother was born in Albany, Georgia. And all eight of my aunts and my uncle were born in Albany, Georgia. It was in Albany, Georgia that my Madia, it's what we call my grandmother, it's short for Mother Dear. It's where I watched her care for, clean for, and cook for not 1, 2, or 3, but 4 generations of her family. It's where I learned to love my family. It's where I learned to love God, because Mount Moriah Baptist Church was on land that was donated by my grandfather right behind our farm. It's where I learned to love principles, like the principle of justice. Hearing my mother talk about her experiences in the civil rights movement, where she was shot with water cannons, bit by dogs, and put in jail while in high school. Can you imagine that, while in high school? It's where I learned to love the idea and the value of justice. See, Albany, Georgia is my home because it's where I learned to love. It is the home of my heart. Now, it just so happens that my second home is Washington, D.C. And in the song it says, sitting in the morning sun. Now, we all know the sun rises in the east. And of course, my second home is the east, but to be more specific, the East Coast. To be even more specific, Alexandria, Virginia, Washington, D.C., where I was born, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, New York City, and a little bit Boston. Why? Well, I grew up in Alexandria. I went to elementary school, high school in Alexandria. I did my first internship my senior year. And I worked in this organization, and I sat there, and as I was doing my work, I realized 2 things. I realized, one, that I didn't want to sit behind a desk 9 to 5, or 8 to 6, or 7 to 7 all day long. That was not me. I also learned as I was sitting there doing all the travel arrangements for everybody else that I wanted somebody to pay me to travel. I love that. And to this day, my career is guided by those principles. Washington, D.C. is where I was born, but most of us like to think of Washington, D.C., especially now in the election cycle, as Republicans versus Democrats. There's always 2 sides to every issue. But in reality, what I learned in Washington, D.C. is that there are multiple sides to every issue. And so when I learn something new, when I approach an issue, I don't just approach it from the 2 sides. I learn all the aspects of it. And that's why I can understand an issue. Philadelphia, 1976, bicentennial of this great country, 200th anniversary of America. My mother took me to Philadelphia, and I got a chance to see the Declaration of Independence. I got a chance to almost touch the Liberty Bell. And I realized that everything has history, and history affects everything. So now when I meet a new person, hear a new idea, the first thing I do is find out what is the history behind that. New York City. I used to go to New York City 10, 15 times a year. And I was there on 9/11. And on 9/11, I saw the worst and the best of mankind. As I sat inside the United Nations building, watching on the screen as both towers went down, the worst of mankind. As I walked through to where I was staying, and I saw all the people lined up around the block to give blood, to volunteer, to help their fellow man, I saw the best of humankind. Then even Boston. Now, I've only been to Boston once, but I learned a valuable lesson in Boston. Because the one time I went to Boston, it was the dead of winter, and in the longest walk of my life, I walked from the metro station to the hotel, and I learned one very important thing. I will never want to live in a city where it's both snowy and windy at the same time. That actually led me to my third home. Sitting on the dock of the bay, the San Francisco Bay. Here, this is now my home. And I know that I love this home because I have pride in the aromas of the taquerias on the Mission. I have pride in the taste of Tom Yum Tole at my favorite Thai restaurant in the Tenderloin, and the rest of the Thai restaurants all over the city. The beautiful warmth of Ocean Beach and the sunrise over the sunset, not a rise, set over the Pacific Ocean. It's looking at the beautiful grandeur of the Golden Gate Bridge and the views from Mount McLaren, Mount Davidson, Mount Sutro, and the Twin Peaks. I love San Francisco. It's my new home. It's my third home. My heart is home in Albany, Georgia. My head was molded on the East Coast. My hands, my eyes, my tongue, my feet are now in San Francisco, my third home. So when people ask me, what is my home? I don't give them that short, easy answer that's incorrect. No, I've realized it's a long, complicated answer. And I tell them, I'm a Southern gentleman with the East Coast mentality in a West Coast environment. It's the best of all worlds. And with that, it's time for me to go home.
Thank you, Anthony. Great job.
Thank you.
So how many clubs are you a member of?
I have been a member of at least 3 different clubs. Right now, I'm a member of my home club, Rhino, the Crash, as our former speaker was. That's right, representing Rhino first and foremost. Yes?
Great. Now, you told me earlier that you normally don't sing in public.
I've sung in public 3 times, and it was the 3 times I performed this particular speech. In the shower, I sound really good. But when I see myself later, yeah. But I sound really good doing that song in the shower.
Oh, you sounded good here, too.
Thank you for that line.
So tell me a little bit about your brilliant diamond speech crafting.
Actually, I've created a methodology to organize a speech. It's called Brilliant Diamond. And the wonderful thing is this was the first speech that I actually used to craft the Brilliant Diamond. So the opening and the closing were connected, started by singing, ended by whistling the same song, had 3 points, and that's how I worked my way through it.
Fantastic. Yeah. Thanks so much, Anthony.
Right.
Appreciate it. Next, we're going to hear from Anthony's evaluator. He is the Vice President of Education of Next Step. Please help me welcome Dhwani Shah.
What an amazing icebreaker, Anthony. And for all of our audience in the studio here and on TV, if you notice, Birgit did mention that these are advanced speakers. So Anthony isn't giving his first icebreaker, so don't scare away from Toastmasters. These are the people who come here and teach us. I loved how you gave your icebreaker a spin. You talked about home, which is the first thing that comes to mind when you think about an individual. That's where you're born, that's where you grow up. And a lot of people love to put in a timeline, which is great because it gives them an opportunity to talk a lot about themselves, where they came from. You took home and you had the timeline. You talked about different places, and I thought it was done splendidly. I loved how you had specific examples and learnings and lessons from each of these places that made you who you are. And that actually is what completed the icebreaker, because it's all about getting to know you. Going back to your introduction or your start, you started with a song. And I know we all talk about eye contact, but you had your eyes closed. That was wonderful. You were having a great time here. I'm not going to sing, because I'm way worse. But when he had a great time singing and we could see it, you almost, I thought I was going to just listen to the song the entire time, but you stopped and you moved to your speech. Very well done, very well rehearsed. You then gave us enough examples, a lot of alliteration, a lot of good vocabulary, a lot of pictures that you painted in front of us, especially when you talked about each of these places, and specifically San Francisco. I've lived in the Bay Area for over 9 years, but I haven't seen all of this. I've never thought of describing San Francisco so well. So thank you for doing that. A couple of suggestions. When you talked about Georgia, where you loved love and justice, and you were talking about the treatment or the experiences your mother had, I thought you could have slowed down a little. You said at the end, and that was very well delivered, which is, and all of that when she was in high school. But I thought that the build-up could have been even better if you'd slowed down and paused a little longer. The other minor thing for a speaker like you is you often have a tendency of using you know or you see, which sometimes is okay, but when you do it a couple of times, then we can figure out it's a filler word. But other than that, I had a fabulous time listening to you, and definitely will check out a Thai restaurant in the city next week. Thank you.
Thank you, Dhwani. Toastmasters is an organization that really helps speakers of all levels, but today we really saw some extremely advanced speakers. We also saw several different styles. We saw a very personal story. We saw a professional story. That just gives you a little bit of a flavor of the range of the different kinds of speeches and presentations that you can practice. The other thing is that there are many different clubs, and each club has a little bit of a personality. So depending on what it is that you want to work on, whether it's the more professional speeches, whether it's the more creative or personal speeches, there is a club that will fit your needs. There are some clubs that help beginning speakers. There are some clubs for advanced speakers, such as what you saw today. And as you could also tell, both evaluators are also extremely advanced, and they've also been speaking with Toastmasters for a very long time. So we hope that you will join one of our over 200 clubs in the district. To find a club near you, please visit us at d4tm.org and find a club near you. And we hope you'll join us soon. Thank you.